In the previous video, we discussed solving a quadratic equation by factoring using the zero product property and also by using the square root property. In this video, we'll cover completing the square to solve a quadratic, and that's all, just completing the square. And the subsequent videos will cover the quadratic formula. So this will be part 2 of section 1.4. And this is something we've already taken down, just a reminder that a quadratic equation is in standard form if written as ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, so this gives us the steps to complete a square and solve a quadratic equation. If a does not equal 1, then we have to make it so by dividing both sides of the equation by whatever a is. Then we will rewrite the equation so that the constant term, which is c, is alone on the other side of the equality symbol. So this would become ax squared plus bx equals negative c in this case. Step 3, we square half of the coefficient of x, so b, and add it to both sides of the equation. So we take b, divide it by 2, and square it, and add that to both sides. Then we factor the resulting trinomial, which will be here, as a perfect square, and combine like terms on the other side, over here. Then you can use the square root property to complete the solution. Alright, so our first example here has a value of a at 1, so we do not have to worry about step 1 on the previous clip. But we do need to rewrite the equation so that our constant is on the other side. And so I'm going to do that now. So I've just rewritten it so that 14 is now on the right-hand side of the equation. And now my next step is to figure out what term needs to go here so that I could make this a trinomial to factor. And I do that with b divided by 2 squared. And my b value is negative 4, so that's going to be negative 4 divided by 2 squared, which is negative 2 squared. And I'm writing out all the steps because when I do that, this number left in here is going to end up being something that I'm going to use. And so that's why I show each step. So if I finish this out, this is going to be 4. And that's the number I'm going to add to each side of the equation. So we have x squared minus 4x plus 4 here, and I would do 14 plus 4 on the right-hand side. And now what I've done is I've created a trinomial on the left-hand side here that will factor into a perfect square. And I'm going to do that using this number. So this trinomial will factor into, without doing any work really, x minus 2 squared. And then I'm just going to simplify 14 plus 4, and that's 18. And now I can use my square root property. So I take the square root of each side, which gives me x minus 2 is equal to the plus or minus the square root of 18. And next, I'll move my negative 2 to the right-hand side, so we get x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 18. And the last step would just be to simplify the square root of 18. I know that 18 is 9 times 2, and the square root of 9 is 3. So this is x equals 2 plus or minus 3 square roots of 2. Alright, this will be our final example. And I have 9x squared minus 12x plus 9 equals 0. And this time, since my a term is not 1, I have to divide out and make it 1 to complete the square. So I'm going to divide everything by 9. And here you see the resulting equation, x squared minus 4/3 x plus 1 equals 0. And now step 2, I need to rewrite it so that c is on the other side. So I'm going to do that now, which will make this a negative 1. And now my goal is to figure out what term I need to put here so that I can make this a trinomial that will factor into a perfect square. And so I do that by, again, b divided by 2 squared. B in this case is negative 4/3. So I'm going to do negative 4/3. And dividing by 2 is the same thing as 1/2 times. So I'm going to do 1/2 times 4/3 negative squared. So that gives me negative 4/6 squared. And negative 4/6 reduces to negative 2/3 squared. And remember that negative 2/3 is going to be important for us in a moment. So I'm going to go ahead and put a star by it so that I remember I need to use that in a moment. And now negative 2/3 squared would be 4/9. So I'm going to take 4/9 and add it to each side of my equation. I get x squared minus 4/3 x plus 4/9 equals negative 1 plus 4/9. And now I can take this trinomial and factor it into a perfect square. And I'm going to use this negative 2/3 to do so. So this becomes x minus 2/3 all squared, which equals negative 1 plus 4/9 is negative 5/9. And once I have it looking like this, I can do the square root property to solve this quadratic equation. So I take the square root of each side. So I have x minus 2/3 equals plus or minus the square root of negative 5/9. And I'm going to go ahead and get myself a new slide so I have room to write. So next I'm just going to move my negative 2/3. I have x equals positive 2/3 plus or minus the square root of negative 5/9. And now my goal that I need to do is simplify this negative 5/9. So I'm going to come to the side to do that. So I take out an I for the negative part, and that leaves me with the square root of 5, over the square root of 9, which is equal to I root 5/3. And so my answer is going to be x equals 2/3 plus or minus, and I write it as I root 5/3. You might also write it as root 5 divided by 3 with the I button in the back. And that is our final example for tonight.